Hello everybody, and welcome to the Rainey review for the September 2024 quarter. This slide shows the growth of $1 invested in various asset classes for the 3 months ended 30 September 2024. After a mixture of positives and negatives in the June quarter, to misquote old Blue Eyes, that's Frank Sinatra to anyone who's unfamiliar, it certainly appears that spring has, in fact, sprung. Every asset class we report on has delivered a positive return for the quarter. The leader this quarter is global infrastructure, in orange, where $1 invested 3 months ago would have grown to $1.09. Pipped into second place, after appearing to have a healthy lead in August, is New Zealand property in black, which would have grown to $1.08. Middle of that unambiguously positive pack is a 50-50 mix of shares in property and cash and fixed interest, where $1 invested 3 months ago would have grown to $1.05. That's a good quarter. This slide shows the growth of the dollar invested in those same asset classes, this time over the 12 months ended 30 September 2024. The leader over 1 year is unhedged international shares in navy, where $1 invested a year ago would have grown to $1.25. In second place, in Australian gold, is Australian shares, where $1 invested a year ago would be just over $1.23. Global infrastructure, in orange, was good for bronze, where $1 invested a year ago would be $1.21. Again, middle of the pack is that 50-50 mix of shares in property and cash and fixed interest, which would have grown to $1.14. That's a very good year. I always say 1 year isn't long enough. We need at least 3 years' data. This slide shows the growth of $1 invested in those same asset classes, this time over 3 years. The leader over 3 years is, again, unhedged international shares in navy, where $1 invested 3 years ago would have grown to $1.40. In second place is Australian shares in Australian gold, where $1 invested 3 years ago would have grown to $1.32. In third place is global infrastructure in orange, where $1 invested 3 years ago would also have grown to $1.32. That's where the lines diverge. Effectively, above the cash return in green are the winners I just spoke about, and the also-rans are below. Top of those also-rans, along with emerging market shares in red, is that 50-50 mix of shares in property and cash and fixed interest, which would have grown to $1.09. While this is flat in a 3-year sense, it is beginning to climb. This year, we saw the passing of an unlikely economics giant, psychologist Daniel Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman passed away at the age of 90 in March this year. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2002 for his work on biases and heuristics, which challenged the assumption of human rationality in economics. Kahneman became known as the grandfather of behavioural economics for this breakthrough. Perhaps his most famous piece of work, and the work that was cited in his Nobel Prize award, was his work on prospect theory. This helps explain why we don't feel as excited by good returns as we feel disappointed by bad returns. Prospect theory is essentially an extension of loss aversion. Loss aversion is a cognitive bias which results in us perceiving a loss of a certain number to be much worse than we perceive a gain of the same number. Like all economic concepts, it's better with a picture. This chart is a utility function. Think of it as economic shorthand for a happiness function. Up on the y-axis is positive utility, or happiness, and down on the y-axis is negative utility, or sadness. The x-axis shows losses to the left and gains to the right. Kahneman's work showed that we feel loss approximately twice as much as we feel gain. In this example, while making $100 will make us quite happy, losing $100 will make us very sad. Like many academics, Kahneman was also an accomplished writer and gained particular fame for his 2011 book, Thinking, Fast and Slow. The book describes 2 ways of thinking: fast, emotional, automatic, unconscious; easy but limited; and slow, logical, calculating, conscious, powerful but difficult. It explains why we find it hard to think slow. We suffer from biases and use heuristics, or mental shortcuts, over and over again to aid decision making. These biases and mental shortcuts can make thinking fast, but not always good. He describes numerous biases and focuses on overconfidence bias, the brain's propensity to overestimate what it knows about the world and underestimate the impact of randomness. This bias is directly applicable to investing. It's a great read and one I recommend. Perhaps Kahneman's best lesson is from a quote attributed to both him and Benjamin Graham, known as the father of value investing. The investor's chief problem, even their worst enemy, is likely to be themselves. One of the best ways for investors to protect themselves from, well, themselves, is to have an expert, evidence-based advisor to help manage their biases, avoid predictions, and focus on the long term. Thank you for watching. I look forward to updating you again in the next edition of the Rainey Review.